I was looking back in a lot of the projects I've done in the past, and I thought I'd make a couple videos of a few things I did. Now, I have a little bit of documentation, pictures, and such I'll talk about. One of them was a restoration of a Pioneer SX-82 vacuum tube stereo receiver. And you think back of all the projects you may have done in the past, and I've always been screwing around with electronics. And it wasn't until about 10, 11 years ago that I decided to get back into playing around with vacuum tubes. When I was younger, there were a lot of old vacuum tube radios all over the place. And being a teenager, I had a lot of things to play with back then. And I've always been avid experimenter with electronics. I have some electronics background, but for 45 years, I was electrical maintenance tech in a local hospital, which you get involved in a lot of things with other than just electrical, because I grew up with it all there with all the networking that I hadn't been involved with. And gee, I remember there were two computers there when I first started, and they were Commodore PET computers, and they used them for database in the X-ray department. So I watched the whole thing grow and was involved in a lot of stuff and as things grew up there. When I think back on some of the things I did, and I have to laugh, boy, if we're smart enough to patent things that we did in the past, is in my late teens, early 20s, I had a 1969 Roadrunner, and wow, it saw its demise when I rolled it over one time. But my friends used to joke around of all my inventions, they call them, because I went to the junkyard and found a old console, and I had designed my own security keypad system with sounds, and you actually had to start the car with the buttons on the console and put in the code, and you had buttons for ignition, accessories for the starter, and my one friend he called it my space start. Anyway, back to the Pioneer SX-82, and it was quite a nice little receiver. I think it's about 69 vintage, and you can see a couple of the photos that I still have of the front of it, and here is a photo of the rear with all the connections that were on the back of the day. And this probably was about 11 years ago that I had bought this, or so 11, 12. I don't remember, because I decided, hey, I'm going to start playing around with some vacuum tube equipment again. And I didn't have much test equipment back then, didn't have a good scope, didn't have a good signal generator, but I got by. This SX-82 was quite a receiver if you check out the specs here. And this guy had a total of 21 tubes in it. In the whole section, 6 BE6 had 4 6 BA6, 3 6 AQ8s, 3 12 AX7s, 6 GC7, a 6 CW4, and 2 6AN8s. And for the output stage, it ran 4 7189A vacuum tubes, which gave it, according to the specs there, they called it music output power back then, 40 watts per channel, or RMS rated 28 watts per channel. And it was quite a nice receiver. And I'm kind of sorry I got rid of it. I should have kept on it, because my goodness, it's probably worth a lot more today. So it was a nice unit. And here's the front of it again. And you see all the controls on there. And it was AM, FM stereo. And it had quite a nice sound to it when I finished it up. I had Of course, you couldn't find the 7189 tubes for, any reasonable amount of money, but I replaced them with some Russian 6P, 14P ERs, and boy, they performed nice. What I had to do to this was there were a few resistors burnt in the cathode of the output tubes. They might have been the 10 ohm. I'm not sure. It could have been what they used, wire wound, but we can look at the schematic there. I'll show it later. But if you look on the top, how the tube layout is and the complements of the tubes, and I had replaced all the can filter caps in there. You see the two big ones, and of course there was a problem with the sizing of the holes and mounting the two smaller caps there on the right by the transformer. And what I had did is I took, if you look at this close up, I took some PVC and cut it down about maybe 3/4 inches of PVC. I don't remember what size, but the caps kind of fit in. And I glued the caps into the PVC, and then I mounted the PVC with the straps. So that worked out nice on those caps. And if you look at the schematic, it's rather busy. That's what my friend said one time when he saw the bottom shots that I'm about to show you. Said it's a rather busy inside. But I replaced every capacitor in there, the electrolytics and all the paper caps, everything in there. I think I used Illinois caps. I'm not sure. If you look at the bottom here, you can see what I did. And it took me a total time. Of course, I was still working back then, so it took me about a month and a half, 2 months off and on in the evenings because I had a little closer shot and two more close shots of what it looks like inside. But when you're doing this, you need just to take your time and one thing at a time, and be careful when you're not to damage any of the other wiring when you're screwing around replacing all these components. But it took me some time, and be persistent a little bit at a time, and you'll get there. I replaced all the caps. Now, I never did get to align the FM because I didn't have the equipment to do it at the time. I do now, so I wish I would have got it, but it still worked pretty good. And it was a nice sounding stereo for back then. I'm not sure what this unit would have cost back in 1969, I think it was. But I wish I would have kept it, and I sold it to someone. And as the next video, a couple of my earlier amplifiers, I just have some photos that I did, and those are gone also. But so if you decide to do any of this with one of these receivers, just take your time in removing all the components one at a time, solder the new in, and just be careful not to damage everything, as sometimes you have to get under some of the old wiring, and it can be a little tedious, but with the proper tools, take your time and you'll get there. So I'll leave the schematic down in the description section here. I'll leave a link to the schematic in case anybody wants it, in the spec sheet. So I do have a service manual for it still, but I'll probably keep a hold of that. I'm not going to post that because actually I had to pay for that. So do you have any questions about this particular receiver? What I can remember, I can answer. And have a good day.